Good afternoon and welcome to the Prairie Lithium Investor Webinar. I'm Jane Morgan, Investor and Media Relations Manager. For those who may be new to the company, Prairie Lithium is focused on developing one of North America's largest lithium brine resources with approximately 4.6 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent and is advancing towards commercial production using direct lithium extraction technology. Today's webinar will provide an update on the significant milestones the company has achieved over the past year and what investors can look forward to as we move closer to production. Today's webinar will be an overview from the team, followed by a Q&A session. To ask a question throughout today's webinar, please use the Q&A function which can be found at the bottom of your screen. With that, I'll hand you over to Paul Lloyd, our Managing Director, as well as Zach Maurer, our Executive Director. Paul, I'll hand to you.
Thank you, Jane, and good afternoon, shareholders. We're calling in from Regina, Canada. As I look out the window, the snow's starting to melt and the harsh Canadian winter is behind us, which will give us the ability to fast track the production at pad number 1. But before I ask Zach to give the full details, and we do have a video of the latest activity at the site, which we were at on Friday, just summarise where we're at with the Prairie Lithium project. It's obviously our main focus. We are laser focused on building the first plant, and the benefit of that is to monetize that large resource that Jane mentioned, 4.6 million tonnes of LCE. To sort of put that in perspective, the market for lithium is only really just a little bit above 1 million tonnes per annum. So it's a very large resource over a very large land holding of 345,000 acres. And that's all Crown land. It sits to the south of where we are presently, and it's only 14 kilometres over the US-Canadian border. It's in an existing oil field, and Zach will talk about that later, but that comes with massive advantages in developing this project. So we're very excited about where we are today, and then now we want to monetize that large resource and create shareholder value. We do that via the implementation of direct lithium extraction, and we have done a lot of testing on the direct lithium extraction. Our brine at the Prairie project was considered a very clean brine. It doesn't have hydrocarbons in it. It doesn't have any H2S. It doesn't have a lot of other impurities. So the DLE technology that we've selected works extremely well. We can talk to investors, we can talk to shareholders all day long, but there's nothing better than putting the project into production. The first stage is 150 tonnes per annum, and we are fast tracking that development. That 150 tonnes is 100% sold to Hydro Lithium, a South Korean lithium hydroxide producer, which we are building our relationship with that company, and they have visited a number of times to our project in Canada, and I'll be in Seoul next month to further that relationship. That's a very positive relationship. It comes with a lot of processing skills. We're very good at finding this resource. We're very good at building out the plant, but nothing substitutes the knowledge that Hydro have in regards to the downstream processing. So very exciting stage of development for the company, and we'll just show a video now of what we're doing at site. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Jane, and hopefully everyone enjoyed that video. I know we highlight a lot of this progress in the text of our press releases, but obviously the purpose of putting together this video content is to show you some visuals of what we're up to on the ground and what we get to work with every day here in Saskatchewan. So just a tremendous effort by the whole team here at Prairie Lithium, and our management team here in Canada, Chelsea and Carrie. Everybody doing a fantastic job so that we've now got walls going up and significant construction progress underway. As we've been announcing over the last couple of months, in terms of submitting our power ticket, installing our power poles in January, getting the transformer set on site, executing the foundations work in January and February, and ultimately putting forth this prefabricated steel structure so that we can expedite on-site construction time of the actual building itself. So in terms of remaining steps for the building, we've got to finish up the walls and the roof here in the coming weeks, and then we'll move on to the interior work, where we'll get into the electrical and the interior concrete slab, where then we'll be ready to receive the skid-mounted DLE unit to slide into the building thereafter. So a lot of exciting milestones and a lot of work underway in what can be challenging weather conditions at times. But again, it just goes to show that as a result of operating where we are and having access to the skills and infrastructure that we do, the benefits to our project are quite clear. And I think it's important that we reiterate that this is a very special project. Southeast Saskatchewan in the Duperow Formation contains the highest grade lithium brines in all of Canada. So when it comes to technical merits, when you look at resource grade and economics, Southeast Saskatchewan is among the top, not only in Canada but in North America, and what we're fairly convinced of will be among one of the leading basins in the world here for DLE projects. So that's an important note that we need to continue to reiterate to our shareholders, that this is a very high quality lithium brine resource in a great jurisdiction. So speaking more to that jurisdiction, we are permitted for commercial production of 150 tons per annum. We're the only lithium brine project in Canada that's permitted to establish commercial production of lithium and sell that lithium under an offtake, in our case, which would be going into South Korea. So those are some really major differentiating factors about our project in terms of developing the highest grade lithium brine resource in the country, the only project permitted for commercial production in the country, and an offtake in place so that we can immediately start selling production and generating revenue on the backside of our production. So expanding in a little bit more detail about our offtake and our relationship with Hydro Lithium. Paul mentioned it a couple of minutes ago in terms of what we're working on with them from an offtake perspective, and it's been a very collaborative engagement with Hydro Lithium to date. And it shouldn't be understated. Paul mentioned it, the expertise that they're bringing to this project in terms of their lithium processing knowledge. They have an operational lithium refinery, current production capacity of 3,600 tons per annum, actively looking for feedstock in South Korea. And their CEO, Dr. Chan, he's worked all over the world on lithium brines. And there's a reason that he continues to come back to Saskatchewan, and that's because of our ability to get a high quality resource into production. And his vindication of that is very validating to us. And we're just beyond ecstatic to have groups like Hydro and people like Dr. Chan as a part of our project. When they've been here, there's been lots of engagement with both provincial and federal officials here in Saskatchewan and in Canada. We're going to continue that collaboration here at the end of the month. Paul will be traveling into South Korea, and he'll be working with them closer to hopefully expand our collaboration with Hydro Lithium, as well as partaking on another federal Canadian critical mineral trade mission into South Korea. From a government relations perspective, I was just in Europe a couple of weeks ago with the Federal Minister of Energy and Resources and various staff throughout Europe. It's clear that lithium and critical minerals in general, but particularly lithium, are they're a priority for the federal government, and we've got a lot of support from the Canadian federal government, and obviously a lot of support from the provincial government, who's been standing behind this project since day one, and has worked with us hand in hand, throughout drilling the first lithium brine well in Canada, operating some of the first production of lithium carbonate samples here in the province, and ultimately where we are now with being the first permitted lithium project in the country, and looking forward to continuing our construction on site and receiving our key equipment and ultimately putting this project into production and selling into that offtake that we've negotiated with Hydro Lithium. So a lot of exciting things happening here on the ground, and it looks like a very exciting 2026, highlighted by also the price of lithium doubling here to kick off the year has been quite motivating as well for the team.
So when we look at that building, shareholders should understand that this project will be built out on a modular basis. And that applies for pad number 1 as well. Its run rate is 150 tonnes per annum, and that has been sold to Hydro Lithium, as we previously mentioned. But that building will just be built out on a modular basis as well. We will just take one of the walls down and we'll extend it. And we'll continue to extend it until it gets to a run rate of 2,000 tonnes of LCE per annum. So the building will be built out on a modular basis, so will the DLE facilities, so will the pre-treatment, etc. This is the sort of project that can be built out on a modular basis. Pad number 1 completed. You go and do the same thing at pad number 2, pad number 3, pad number 4. Once you've shown that the DLE works, the direct lithium extraction, we just replicate that model across that very large land holding. So I think we have some questions, Jane.
We've got quite a few questions. And again, I encourage webinar attendees to use the Q&A function, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. While we're sifting through them, I might just start with you, Zach. I mean, the market has been experiencing this sort of turmoil over the supply of oil at this present time. We're obviously producing lithium for powering cars and energy storage, but we're going to need electricity to move the large volumes of brine. So with this, the oil supplies and where we're at the moment, is this going to have an effect on our project?
No, not directly. And that's attributed to Saskatchewan generates the majority of their electricity from the coal mines and the power plants down in Estevan, Saskatchewan. Those are some of the largest power plants in the province. So throughout all this, what's happening in the oil and gas sector right now, we're not reliant on diesel electricity generation. So we've got a very stable and reliable electricity grid here in Saskatchewan. So that will not affect our access to electricity and power.
Thank you. And Paul, I might hand to you for this one. So the company continues to state that the project obviously lies in this existing oil field. Oil prices lifting, is that going to create any problems for us?
No, I don't think that will create any problems, because this is an oil field that is depleting, and being in an oil field comes with benefits. In fact, the supervisor we have on site, we visited on Friday, he is an oil and gas guy, and he's helping out with the construction. Very detailed, accurate sort of guy. There is just infrastructure abounds in this area. As I mentioned previously in other webinars, if I stand on pad number 1, look in every direction, we see oil and gas facilities. So there might be a little bit of extra work there, but we can always get drill rigs, we can always get cranes on site, we can get staff. And so it is really a pleasure to operate in that oil field.
And just further to that then, so how do we see this as an advantage? Because it must be difficult to extract the oil from the brine before you extract the lithium.
So what we do is we are exploiting the Dupro formation, which is a deeper formation to the oil and gas operation. So we don't own the oil and gas rights. And when we bring our brine to surface, it doesn't have any oil and gas in that. But it is an oil and gas field. So you have all the infrastructure, you have the fast permitting system, you have all the stakeholders totally familiar with the business model, because the business model is very similar. You're bringing liquid to surface, separating it. The oil and gas guys are separating the hydrocarbon, and you're re-injecting the remains. We're doing exactly the same thing. We're filtering the lithium from the material brought to surface using direct lithium extraction, and then we're re-injecting that material back down the hole, or down the well, I should say, So we're doing exactly the same business model. So it's always good to be operating in an area where you have all the stakeholders engaged.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's sort of passed me on to the next one. And Zach, you covered a little bit of this in your presentation. So how's the communication with the Canadian government looking for potential future funding?
Yeah, we're actively involved in a lot of government relations work, as evidenced by our participation on federal trade missions with federal ministers. So we are actively evaluating all of the different potential funding mechanisms that could come from the federal government.
Perfect. Sorry, bear with me. There's quite a few coming through. Zach, I'm going to stick with you for this one. So we've spoken obviously about utilizing DLE technology. For investors that might not be familiar with the process, can you just explain a little bit about how it actually works and why it's particularly suited to lithium brine resources like the Prairie Project?
Yeah, so the concept of DLE is it's quite simple. You produce your saltwater brine to surface. You run it through a column that's packed with beads, or a sorbent, as we call it. And as that brine is passing through the column, the lithium is basically being absorbed onto the beads or the sorbent within the column. All of the other salts and contaminants are staying in solution and flowing through the column. We can then strip the lithium out of the sorbent once it's saturated with a reverse osmosis, or RO water as we call it, and that'll create a concentrated lithium eluent or lithium chloride. You'll hear it referred to as a couple of different things. So we can strip the lithium out into our lithium chloride. I've actually got a sample of it right here, funny enough. And that's essentially how DLE works. Is it's concentrating the lithium into a solution and rejecting the majority of impurities, and from there you can then further concentrate, soften and polish, and go through the conversion steps to achieve a battery grade product.
A good simple analogy, Jane, is your pool filter, and we're just passing it through a filtration system, and it's twofold. It's upgrading the lithium in the material, it's attracting to it, but it's also rejecting all those impurities that cause issues with downstream processing. Those impurities are passing through the sorbent and they're being re-injected back into the aquifer. So that's a massive advantage. And we know that direct lithium extraction is something that the oil and gas super majors are heavily investing in the Smackover formation in Arkansas. So we would like to beat them to the punch, basically, and go into production by the end of the year using direct lithium extraction. That technology that we're using is one of the technologies that those large super majors are evaluating. We're not out on our own. We're not using a technology that's unknown. It's Coke technology. It's very good technology, but most importantly, it works well on our brine.
Wonderful. Paul, I'm actually going to hand to you for this one. And there's quite a few questions coming through just on that offtake with hydrolithium. So perhaps giving a little bit more detail about that, but then also how important it is to have that commercial pathway in place before production begins.
Yes. So when we looked to build pad number one on a proof of concept basis, we looked at producing an intermediate product. And an intermediate product, really, we weren't sure when we first came up with that idea like 18 months ago if there was marketability or saleability of that product. Then we came across hydro lithium in South Korea, and they have the requirement for that product. And now there's a few other companies now signing off takes for that intermediate product. The intermediate product is very profitable for us. There's a lower OPEX and a lower CAPEX. So as we build critical mass with this project on a modular basis, we can look to do further downstream processing at site when we have critical mass. But at the moment, this suits us hand in glove type deal with hydro because they have the production facilities in South Korea. They do produce 3,600 tonnes per annum of lithium hydroxide, and they're selling that to the major battery companies in South Korea and around Asia. There's definitely a bit of competition in South Korea to build that processing network out. They understand that the Chinese control that space, and they're very keen to take a portion of that expanding processing trade.
Wonderful. Paul, I'm going to stick with you for this as well and come through a few times. Financially, how well positioned is the company to continue with this funding, construction and development, particularly as this project advances towards production?
Yes, we're well funded at the moment with north of $8 million in the bank. We're waiting on the DLE facilities to be delivered in Q2, and we're designing and fabricating the back end and the front end of that plant. So a lot of those costs will be in the back end of the year, and we're talking to larger groups, people looking at buying in at their project level, and also our off-taker. We're improving and growing our relationship with our off-taker, and there may be a transaction there in the future where they will back this project because Dr. Chon has been to Canada twice. He's met the government officials. He's been to see fabricators, etc. He likes the project, and I think you'll find he's prepared to back it.
Wonderful. And just moving on to the next one now. Zach, I'll hand to you actually for this. And there was a good slide in our recently lodged investor presentation, but it's about lithium pricing cycles and where we've kind of been over the last couple of years. So from your perspective, how do you view the current lithium market and where we kind of are in that cycle?
Yeah, I mean, what we focus on is the demand, and the demand hasn't faltered. Price has obviously been volatile over the last couple of years, but that's a result of more so of supply coming online as opposed to demand fluctuations. Demand has been growing up and to the right year over year, and we expect that it will continue to grow in demand year over year. And we're seeing global EV growth. We're seeing energy for grid reliability, battery storage. That's been one of the largest contributors for some of the demand early this year, late last year. So we're just seeing continued demand for that product, and yeah, that's what we focus on, is what's the global demand growth look like? Where is that supply going to come from? And right now we're in a healthy price environment, which is good. But again, we're focused on that long-term demand, and that's what we want to feed into.
Yeah, absolutely.
When the lithium commodity price bottomed out at sort of $7,500 a tonne, if you look at the supply side, there was no incentivized supply at those sort of prices. People couldn't make any money at those sort of prices. No one was investing in lithium mines. Now you see a price of $19,500. Remembering that the Prairie Lithium project will be very much on the left-hand side of the cost curve. Everyone in the industry knows that when DLE is proven out, it will be a very low-cost producer, and it will change the industry forever. And that's why you see the big super majors investing in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another one sort of popped up here, which I'll jump into. So how does Prairie position itself within that sort of emerging North American critical minerals supply chain? And more importantly, our location, I guess, what does it provide in terms of government policy, financing support, and offtake opportunities within US and Canadian battery manufacturers?
That's a good question, a very detailed question.
Very. And
the industry is evolving rapidly. So the US is encouraging the mining of lithium via pegmatites and brine projects. But right at this moment, there is very little, if any, refining capacity. And so that has to be built out. So I'm sure President Trump will look into that and incentivize some of those companies. But that's a few years away. So we're producing by the end of this year. And that's why we look to Asia, and that's why we look to Korea, because the processing is there now, not in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years' time. So we don't want to be a company that doesn't have any revenue or we're stockpiling our product. So we look towards Asia. We still see that particularly US refining capacity will grow very quickly, and we have production. As we build out our production profile, we have production that won't be subject to any offtakes, and we'll get a premium for that because there is very limited supply of the product we're producing into those refineries. But at the present time, the here and now is basically Asia. With lithium, you're not talking a huge infrastructure requirement to move the material. The tonnage isn't like iron ore. It's not measured in the millions of tons. It's the first production, as I said before, is 150 tons. That can easily be crystallized and shipped to Korea or all over the world. It's not a large tonnage. We build that up to $3,000 a tonne, and we sell that, and our ultimate production is 20,000 tonnes per annum. So we hope that by the time we get to that sort of production level, there is the refining capacity built out in North America.
Wonderful. Well, that answers quite a few of the questions just on timing. Paul, I'm going to stick with you for this one. So just looking beyond phase one, how scalable is the Prairie Lithium project?
It's extremely scalable. So when we do the proof of concept and we start producing a quality product of 150 tonnes per annum, and our off-taker is very happy with that product, we very quickly go to drilling production wells, drilling disposal wells, and building larger bolt-on parts to the plant. So it's a little bit like a Meccano set. You just keep building more quad pods for the DLE, more pre-strip, etc. So it's kind of like if you think about a mining project, you do a DFS and you do all the work behind that. Our proof of concept is pretty much like a DFS. It's costing $25 million, and in some very large mining projects, the DFS could cost that much. But we show that we can produce the product at a very low op cost, and then we just build it out. The resource will remain extremely consistent, and we have a lot of reference points because of the oil and gas nature of the area we operate. We have a lot of reference points, and we know that that grade is very consistent over the 345,000 acres of land.
Wonderful. Bear with me, I'm just going through all of them. Okay, another one here, just on the offtake. So as construction is progressing well, have transport plans and transport methods been secured for the transport of ore to South Korea?
Yes, would be the short answer. And again, based on the tonnages that we're talking, 150 tons per annum, it's not a huge, massive material annually when compared against grain, oil, potash, other things that move out of the province. So yes, yeah, the logistic infrastructure is well in place.
And in fact, a rail line runs right through the property, which we have an MOU with that rail company to, as we build out production, we'll utilise that rail line.
How quickly can additional pads be developed once the first facility is operational?
I would say the restriction on the building out of the pads would more than likely be funding. So this is an area that there's a lot of drill rigs around. We know what we're doing with the drilling, and we just drill those holes out, the wells out, I should say, and we build out the plant. But I'd say the restricting factor would be funding. And look, we could move a pad in every year, I would suggest.
Yeah, and worth noting that pad 2 and pad 3 are already signed up with landowners. With the details ironed out, so those pads are even partially built and drilled. So those next 2 pads are they're ready to go.
Thank you, gentlemen. Quite a few questions to hear on just the ESG sort of components, and I mean, I guess so. What advantages does Prairie Lithium process have compared to sort of conventional lithium production?
Look, the production from an oil field of a lithium brine, the ESG component is sensational. So basically, you're talking about something equivalent to, say, in situ mining. So the environmental footprint at surface is very minor. Think about it like an oil and gas well, very minor footprint. And then, of course, once you've finished producing, all that equipment can be removed and the land can be immediately rehabilitated and go back to farmland that it was before we got there. So the ESG footprint is extremely low, and on all accounts, it is very low. And I think that potential off-takers will look at that as we prove out this project, and they will favour companies like Prairie because of its ESG credentials.
So just on that as well again, so what are the biggest challenges, if any, that are facing Prairie Lithium to get into full production?
So we're fully permitted. We have a large resource. We have a large land holding. We've tested the DLE, and we have the funding to build out the project. It's Basically, funding for further pads is a bit of a challenge, but that won't be a challenge once we show the market that we can produce. And really, we're biased, but I can't see the huge impediment to this project. The demand for lithium is there. At a 19,500 tonne per annum lithium price, we make very good money, and we can fund it at that sort of price. Zach, can you see any risk or impediments?
No, there's definitely not one that that tops the list. I mean, in a lot of jurisdictions, it would be permitting, and permitting in our jurisdiction is among probably one of the lowest risks, just given where we are and what we're doing. Yeah.
Thanks, gentlemen. Look, I think we've just run a little bit over time, but just to finalize everything, project's growing. So what are sort of the key technical milestones or news flow that investors should be watching out for over the next, 6 to 12 months?
So we're in that construction phase. We are laser focused on the build out of pad number 1. We don't have any concerns about selling the product because that's 100% offtake to hydro. We will receive the quad pod, which is basically the middle part of the plant, in Q2, and we will start to build the other sections of the plant. So the news flow over the next 6 months will be construction.
Wonderful. Well, gentlemen, we have run over, but I want to thank you for your time today. If we've missed any questions from the audience, I encourage you to reach out via the contact details, which can be found on the bottom of our ASX releases. But we look forward to hosting you again next time.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, shareholders.